Go ahead.
Okay, so for my site, they did Abu Rosh. Okay, so and then up there I put Abu Rawash because it's spelled like several different ways. So you can see there Abu Rawash, Abu Rosh, and then also the third one looks like Abu Roach, but
Roach.
So there's different names for it, different kind of spellings. But it lies about 8 kilometers north of Giza. It's the location of the northernmost pyramid in Egypt, known as Lepsius number 1. The pyramid of, and I don't know how to say this word. Do you know how to pronounce that?
Which word?
The D-J...
Well, you put that like Jadefra.
Jadefra.
Yeah.
So the pyramid of Jadefra, also known as Rajadef, and around 50 mastabas, which are located about 1.5 kilometers from Jadefra's pyramid. So excavations of this site were begun by the French Institute of Oriental Archaeology in Cairo, and they were done in the early 1900s. So the layout of the area we have, you can see one is the pyramid of Jadefra, and then the causeway, the northwest cemetery, then over there we have 4, which is the quarry, cemetery, and then Lepsius number 1, which is the northernmost pyramid that I was talking about. Okay, so the first part of it, the Lepsius number 1, is mud brick structure located at Abu Rawash, and it was thought to be the northernmost pyramid in Egypt, so it was given the name Lepsius number 1. It's still unknown whether it's in fact a pyramid, which pharaoh should be accredited to the construction. It's considered by some to be one of the small step pyramids, but which is also known as like the 7 small pyramids, which stretch from Sila to Elephantine. But unlike those pyramids, Lepsius number 1 has an internal substructure, so it could have been intended as a tomb. Pyramid of Jadefri, also known as the Lost Pyramid, the mostly ruined pyramid of Jadefri, the son and successor of Khufu. So originally it was thought that this pyramid had never been completed, but the current archaeological consensus is that it was completed, but that it was built about the same size of the pyramid of Menkaure, which was the 3rd largest Giza pyramid. One notable fact about this pyramid is that the uppermost part of the pyramid has kind of disappeared, revealing internal passageways that run down into the bedrock. So explanations as to why the top is missing kind of vary. The second interesting thing about the pyramid is that it's built on top of a hill, and I'll show you guys a picture of that in just a minute. But the builders faced like the hard task of getting the huge stones like up this hill to build. Okay, so here's the kind of the like pyramid layout. It includes the standard features, the satellite pyramid, main pyramid, mortuary temple, boat pit, enclosure wall, and causeway. But no trace of a valley temple has been discovered yet. Okay, and then Jadefre was the only pharaoh of the 4th dynasty to choose to build his pyramid there. We don't know why, but it was possible that there was like an ideological decision for him abandoning Giza. It's suggested that there was a feud between him and his father Khufu, and that his brother, who's the successor, took the side of Khufu in returning to Giza to build his pyramid. But then Khufu's son completed restoration work on the pyramid of Jadefre, and there's no evidence to support the existence of a feud. So they say that there might have been a feud, but there's no really existence. And then another explanation is that the site was chosen because of its proximity to Heliopolis, which is the center of the cult of Ra. And here's the ruins of it on top of the hill. Yes.
Do you know how big those blocks are in comparison to the normal pyramids? Are they more medium-sized, or are they like the size of people?
I do not know.
Go back one screen. There he
Oh,
is.
cool.
He's sitting.
Oh yeah, I forgot to point that out.
Okay, so they're
Yeah.
a little small. I think that's what I was thinking about it.
Okay, and then the last kind of part of the Abu Rawash is the mastabas. So, unlike the mastabas of Giza, which are close to the pyramids and seem to have been built like with a plan in advance, the ones at Abu Rawash seem to have been built kind of to order and laid out in a more like scattered, haphazard way. So unfortunately, the site had a great deal of damage, and then excavations were like poorly organized and didn't really have good records. So although much has been recovered from the site, it's not fully cataloged and the knowledge of it is limited. Most of the mastabas are composed of external walls, composed of large blocks layered around bedrock core with the upper sections filled in with loose masonry. On the east side, there's a cult niche to the north and an L-shaped chapel to the south, and then some of the southern chapels have brick annexes to extend them. Many of the tombs are anonymous, but some of them have the names of their own owners, and some of the artifacts have been recovered with these names. And here's a picture of one of the mastabas.
All right, thank you. Getting introduced to a lot of interesting sites this way. Here you go. Thanks a lot.
So my site was Sumner South, and the location of Sumner South is it's located along one of the narrowest parts of the Nile River, south of Wadi Halfa and north of Aubrey. Sumner South existed in the Middle Kingdom, so the 12th dynasty. Two different excavations occurred for this site. One was led by Jean Vercouter, who worked for the Sudan Antiquities Service in 1966 to 1968. Oriental Institute expedition was led by Louis V. Zabkar, known for its trade regulations, specifically in between Egypt and Lower Nubia. So, excavating there, they found a fort there, and it was less than a mile south of the larger Semna West Fortress, and in the back you could actually see the, what is it, green? Back over here, that is the West Fort. And the fort was made of stone-paved glacis, and outer brick girdle wall, an inner ditch, and the main buttressed inner wall separated by the ditch by a berm or artificial terrace.
Now, do you know what a glacis is? You think it's something you get at the ice cream store?
Is it like a roadway or anything?
No. Well, I mean, sort of, but not. Basically, a glacis is a, and you can use these not only in ancient Egypt, but right up through medieval times. I suppose somebody might even make them today. I don't know why. But let's say, for example, you have a wall, external wall, of a fort or city or whatever. And you know what people do, ancient people, they wanted to get in your city, and you have a wall. It's often hard to get through the gate because you have so much defenses there. So you would try to go through the wall. Another way to do it, you could go over the wall, or you could go under the wall. So you can go through, under, or over. So to go under the wall, you would have to underdig the wall, and then hope for it to collapse, or maybe make a tunnel under it, or something like that. The glacis, then, is a hard, paved surface that you put up against your wall, usually sloping down away from the wall. So what this would mean is it would sort of be like an artificial slope or hill that said paved. So let's say you wanted to try to approach the wall, pound through it, climb over it, dig under it. You're now going to have to approach it by going up this hard packed surface, which puts you at an angle, which makes it harder for you to do any of that. And if you're going to dig through to get under the wall, you got to also dig through that. So a glacis then is a defensive structure, usually at the base of walls, that have hard-packed surface, often with stones, and it's to prevent you from, or to slow you down, trying to get over, under, or through the wall. Okay, go ahead.
Sumner South was part of a collection of fortresses clustered about the Second Cataract. They were mainly constructed under Sissuret I, and one of the archaeologists ended up finding an offering table, probably dated into the Middle Kingdom, but a Christian population probably ended up destroying it, so we found like bits and pieces. And the fort is actually 34.3 meters long and 33 meters wide. There was a stone staircase that was used as a Nilometer to measure the level of the Nile during flood seasons.
Nilometer.
Nilometer. The fortress was built on a rocky, harsh surface due to steep banks of the Nile River. Oddly enough, the fort was built on low ground. A cemetery was found and dated back to the Meroitic period and the Christian period. Typical Egyptian burials with the bodies on their back facing west. Found other works in the cemetery such as pottery, tools, mirrors, and jewelry. Pottery was found as a dump at this site, actually.
So it's interesting what you say there about the bodies on their back facing west. You know, if you dig up bodies, which I have several times, I won't say how many I've buried, but I've dug up several. You can tell by the way the body was buried, often their religion, sometimes. I mean, just the position. So, for example, facing west, especially in Egypt, means you're facing the place of the dead. If they were, say, more modern burials, and they were Christians, they would be facing east, because Christ returns in the east. So if you go out to a cemetery around here, I guess we got one down the road there. Typically, all cemeteries have their plots laying east and west, with the head of the person, so that if they sat up, they'd be looking east. So, it's not just randomly going there to stick the people in the grave. That's typically the way it's been. Now, I don't know if anybody today has altered that because they have some sort of problem with Christianity or something, but typically across the United States and most Christian Europe and so forth, all the burials of people are so that if they would sit up in the grave, they would be looking east, because Christ will return in the east. If they're a Muslim burial, they would be buried so that if they sat up or stood up, they would be facing Mecca. If they're Jewish, so they'd be facing Jerusalem. Okay? So, now, how much all that convention is followed over here in the United States, I don't know. But I know in ancient times, for example, I'm on a site. One summer we were digging, and we were digging what we thought was a tower to get up on top of the site, some kind of fortification. When we dug in there, we found the bones of a man. And then there was some question people had, well, how old are these bones and so forth. But, I said, well, look at the position of the burial. This is a recent burial. You can kind of tell that from the bones. But also look at the way he's faced. He's facing Mecca. So this was a recent burial, probably of a Bedouin who died on the site. So, there's a lot of little things, a lot of times we see mentioned in our talks here, but there's a lot to that if you look at it, and it just shows how people's thinking and customs and beliefs sometimes show up in, say, what we dig up or what we find with them. Okay. Go ahead. But you see, just go back one. Found in the cemetery, pottery, tools, mirrors, and jewelry. So, the other thing you find in a lot of these burials is you find a lot of stuff. This is why a lot of people want to dig tombs. You not only find stuff, but you find stuff that's in good shape. And so that reflects beliefs. They believe there was an afterlife. They believe you would need these things. You would want these things. So even today, sometimes people put stuff in coffins of people. Not only leave their jewelry on them sometimes, but they will put other things in there with them. So that's a reflection of who they were and the idea, at least, that they're going to want this or need this in the next life. Right? So I don't know what will be in your. See, now nobody's burying anybody, so it takes away all the fun for the archaeologists. They just burn people up. Toss their stuff to the wind. What?
My uncle died. My mom put a Twinkie in his casket.
A Twinkie?
I
Really?
It's funny, yeah.
Why a Twinkie?
This is very
He
sad.
loved Twinkies.
He loved Twinkies. So there you go. Well,
And they last for 7 years.
Well, it'll last longer than that. I've had 4-year-old Twinkies just taste the same. Go ahead.
Fort Sumner's purpose. According to Stuart Smith at the University of California, Santa Barbara, the fortress provided housing and accommodation for a number of men that would be available to be of use for regulation purposes. These men would oversee the passage of ships carrying cargo and help transport goods to Egyptian vessels. An image on the right is a distilled ulna.
A distilled ulna. You know where that is?
I Googled it. Isn't it your arm?
It is in your arm.
Yeah.
You have 2 bones here in your arm. So it's the distal ulna, not the proximal ulna. Okay, go ahead.
And these were the 2 Egyptologists that ended up excavating there, and one of them ended up Jean Vercouter, I think that's how you pronounce it, but he ended up working on the Temple of Ramses II. But his excavation in the site we were talking about wasn't actually proper. So Louis ended up having a good time and ended up having cleaning up sort of the mess he made and found a little more stuff than him. And
But notice that what happens, I think we see a pattern here, is Egyptologists all die. So you might want to avoid that field.
They die at like 100 or 90.
yeah, no, they lived for
pretty good.
Yeah, they did pretty.
Well, that guy lived 80 years. The other guy
Yeah,
lived
yeah, he made it to
90,
2000.
right?
Yeah.
89, 90, yeah. So yeah, they lived a long life and got to dig a lot too. But this is the thing, it's like the curse of King Tut's tomb. I can guarantee you, everyone who's ever entered King Tut's tomb has died. So be careful. In fact, I've entered it more than once, and I don't feel very well myself.
All right.
It's the curse of the boy king. All right, let's do our next presentation. Well, I have to do a PowerPoint presentation tomorrow morning in Denver, but I need to work on it before then. And then I have to actually get to Denver. Okay.
Alright, so I tried to pronounce this about 4 times, and I came to the conclusion that it's probably Masguna,
Mazguna.
something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
And
I think
so
that's close.
my site was the Masguna Pyramids.
Oh.
Oh, that's a slow transition. So, where are the Masguna Pyramids? They are up here in Lower Egypt,
Near Dashur.
near Dashur. They're about 5 kilometers south, so somewhere around that kind of star. They're on the west of the Nile there.
Dashur, home of the famous Bent Pyramid.
So what pyramids were found? There were 2 pyramids that were technically found, but we never actually found like the pyramids. A lot
There were
of
pyramids that were found, but you never actually found the pyramids?
they were going to build pyramids,
Okay.
and then we don't really know what really happened. We kind of looked at the ground plans and the structures that were there. The archaeologists made some inferences based on what items they found and tried to piece together who these tombs may have belonged to. They decided that the South Pyramid most likely belonged to the 4th, based on the way that the ground plan was made, because it was very similar to the tomb that he had finished building for his father. And the North Pyramid was attributed to Queen Sobekneferu, mostly because of their relationship to one another. So slow. So, couldn't find any really good pictures of what everything looked like because a lot of the information they collected was from 1910, so it doesn't really look the same now. So the idea is that the north one is somewhere over here, and the south one's somewhere over here, but this is kind of all that's left because all the outer casing was either never put on or was stolen or deteriorated, and the mud brick on the interior and such did not last.
It's a sad story.
And then there's some nice palm trees slightly to the other side of where this is located.
Nice palm trees. Gorgeous.
So, a little bit about each pyramid. Amenet the Fourth was the last king of Dynasty 12, and he was the son of Amenet the Third. Although they never actually found any names in the complex, so it wasn't super clear on how they attributed everything, other than they said the styles of how he had built his father's tomb were so similar to this that they assumed that he designed this tomb for himself. So the North Pyramid, I typed that wrong. The North Pyramid is sometimes attributed to his successor, which would have been his sister, but also maybe his wife, Queen Sobekneferu, who ruled for about 3 years herself, and she would have been the last pharaoh. So she would have been queen and not king, which is why he would have been last king. She would have been last pharaoh. So the North Pyramid was planned to be slightly larger, and it was, again, they said it was probably the queen's just based on how it was built, not that they ever found any actual names of those sites. So the South Pyramid and the North Pyramid were both kind of investigated and excavated in 1910 by Ernest Mackay. He was a British archaeologist. And today the mud brick core is pretty much all that we have left of the South Pyramid. The casing is gone, or it was never put on. The prevailing presumption is that it was just never completed, so the mud brick was all that was there. The superstructure of the pyramid never looks like it was started with the North Pyramid, so they're not entirely sure what everything was going to look like, but it was definitely built a little bit more underground than the South Pyramid. And so some pictures to kind of help explain that a little bit. So the South Pyramid, they were able to see where a wall was and where the chapel would have been, and they had an idea of how big it would have been and how tall it would have been. but all the outer casing that would have made it look like a pyramid was pretty much not there. So it had a entrance in the center on the southern side with a descending staircase and side ramps. It also had passages that were blocked by large slabs of granite, so they would have been kind of like almost trap doors that could have slid across and kept everything closed and sealed. And the position of the burial chamber was directly beneath the top axis of the pyramid, and it was 3 turns of little, I guess, hallways that you would have had to go to get down to that burial chamber. So a little bit more about that pyramid. Those, in the burial chamber, there were really large red quartzites, and there was a trench coffin carved that had little places where the canoptic jars would have fit in, little recesses. And it was that was some of the similar burial style that they had seen in Ahmenet's the Third's burial chamber, which is what led them to believe that this was his son's, because it was similar in that way. Another interesting thing is that it was surrounded by this wavy wall, which I couldn't find any really good pictures of, but it was kind of wiggly like that when they found it, which was unique. And it was made of mud brick. The chapel, as you can see, was nice and angular, but the wall surrounding it was there, and they did not find any causeway or valley temple, so nothing was kind of like connecting the pyramid to anything else. It was all encased in itself. Sorry. So the North Pyramid, as you can see, has a lot less detail. We've got some more detail on the actual burial chamber and some of the passageways leading down, but we're not really sure how big the pyramid was or where everything went. It's just kind of a yellow blob. So the entrance to the North Pyramid would have been on the east side, would have had a descending staircase, and it turns several times. As you can see, it doesn't go kind of straight in like the other one. It does lots of little twists and turns here. And it would have had lots of, again, those large slabs of granite or other stone that would have kind of blocked off the passageway to seal the tomb. And it, again, had those really big quartzite blocks with little carved out spaces for the coffin to fit in the little canoptic jars.
They didn't find any burials inside.
Nobody was buried. And so that's what this is saying. Although the sarcophagus block was smooth, plastered, and painted red, there was never any burial there, because there's never any proof of them actually performing any of the rituals of mummification, putting them in there, sealing the tomb. And so that's also kind of a given, considering the rest of the pyramid was never finished. So if they had buried someone there, they would have at least tried to finish the pyramid.
It's sad, isn't it?
It is.
They didn't finish it.
It's a sad,
Thank
unfinished
you.
pyramid.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I believe that's all the ones we have ready right now.